Okay, thank you everybody for joining us this evening for our class. This week's parsha is Parshah Chukas on page 838 in the Art Scroll Chumash in the Hebrew and 839 in the Art Scroll Chumash in English. Tonight's class is being dedicated for Refuah Shalema, for Faith's father, Moshe ben Esther, and he should have a speedy recovery. All the learning that is being done should be as a refuah shalema, should be a merit for refuah shalema for her father, and we are davening and learning. Okay, so Parshah Chukas starts off. It's a pretty full parsha like every parsha, but not like last parsha where the majority of the last two parshas actually the majority of the parsha was sort of one story. Then sort of then offshoots of that story. Parshah Chukas sort of goes back to a typical parsha where there are various different things going on. And let's put that on silent. Boom. Sorry about that. Okay. So Parshas Chukas starts off with Vaydaber Shalom Moshe vel Aaron Lemer. God spoke to Moshe and Aaron saying, "Those chukas Torah. This is the chok of the Torah." Now we've touched upon this idea before that there's a chok. There's different types of mitzvahs, right? There's a chok, which a chok is a mitzvah, a decree. The little translation is a decree, where Hashem did not reveal the reason behind it, right? And then there's mitzvahs where the God did reveal the reasons behind it. And those are sort of the two basic categories. There's others. There's positive and negative, and positive commandments and negative commandments, right? But one of the categories is a chok, right? Which is a mitzvah which God did not tell us the reason. Now, the commentaries and the rabbis over the ages have come up with different ideas, but God did not reveal the reason. Some they have, some they Kabbalistic ideas, right? But God did not reveal the reason. And then the majority of the mitzvahs, Tamei mitzvahs, the reason behind the mitzvahs, God did reveal the reason. The majority of the mitzvahs. Right? So the Torah starts off, Zos chukas Torah. This is the decree of the Torah that God commanded to Moshe and to the Jewish people. And then it speaks about the red heifer, the parah aduma, the red heifer. Now, the red heifer is the epitome of a chok. Where why does it have to be red? And if it has to have, how many white hairs could it have, and how many white hairs can it not have, right? And why is that the only thing that when you kill it, right? And you sprinkle the ashes, that's how a person that's has a tumas mace, a spiritual impurity of death, right? In contact with someone that was dead. The only way that he could be purified if he sprinkles it, but the person that sprinkles it, he becomes impure. And just throwing out some things, it's a chok, because that's what God said, right? Shatnez, also the mitzvah of shatnez, of not mixing wool and linen together, not wearing something that has a mixture of wool and linen, is also a chok, right? That's also a chok. And there's other mitzvahs that are chukim that God did not reveal the reasons behind them. But parah aduma is sort of the epitome, and that's what the Torah says. Zos chukas Torah. This is the chok, the decrees of the Torah, right? And then it speaks about the parah aduma. We're not going to go into the parah aduma right now. Not this year. We're not going to go into the parah aduma. But I want to talk about a chok. So Rav Moshe Feinstein, and we might have said this in the past, but it's always good to repeat this over, right? We might have said it in a different context. But Rav Moshe Feinstein asks, he said, I don't get it. If the Tamei mitzvahs, Maimonides and Nachmanides both wrote something called Tamei mitzvah, the reasons behind the mitzvahs, right? And many others have written about it also. Many others have written about it also, right? And it says Rav Moshe Feinstein, others asked this question also, but Rav Moshe asked this question. He said, I don't get it. The reason, what's the reason behind the mitzvahs? To enable us to connect to the mitzvahs. When we know what the reason is, we're able to connect the mitzvahs. We're able to grow through the mitzvahs. It allows us to do the mitzvahs, on a better level. So why are there mitzvahs where God did not reveal the reasons to them? I mean, like seems to defeat the purpose. Why not reveal the reasons, right? If revealing the reasons will make it easier to connect with the mitzvahs, allow us to grow to the mitzvahs? It's a very legitimate question. Says Moshe Feinstein something very powerful and really a fundamental idea in our relationship with our Judaism and our relationship with Hashem. And says Moshe Feinstein that the thing that we're supposed to learn from a chok is exactly that we don't have the reason. Meaning to say that ultimately when we do the mitzvahs, when we do tzedakah, right, for example, when we do tzedakah, the reason why we do tzedakah is because Hashem commanded us to do tzedakah. Not because, right, it's a good thing to do, it's helping other people out, right, it just feels good, right, it makes me feel better by helping other people out, it's helping other people out, it's social justice, whatever it is, whatever reasons you want to put in, right, or if let's say you are then connecting to the spiritual reason, right? The reason why we do tzedakah is by doing tzedakah. We spoke about this before. By giving tzedakah, you're recognizing that everything that you have is really from Hashem, right? And that's the reason that the spiritual reason. Of course, it's helping other people out, but it's realizing that everything is from Hashem, and that's why there's 10%. You're supposed to give 10% of your income to tzedakah, right, is because God tells you to do that, but realizing that everything that you have is really from Hashem, right? And the example I've given many times, I think I've talked about this in a sermon once, right, is that if I come here and I say, listen, I'm going to give you $1 million, right, but you have to give $100,000 away to charity. Who's going to say no, right? You're still getting $900,000. Right? So when we realize that everything, of course, we have to do our effort, but everything that we have is from Hashem, right? So by giving tzedakah, right, really the depth of tzedakah is really building our emunah. Of course, it's helping other people out, right? But it's building our faith in Hashem, that really everything we have from faith. But even that, and when we give tzedakah, the ultimate reason why we're giving tzedakah is because Hashem told us to give tzedakah. Right? Because we're not doing it because of the reason. We're doing it because we have faith that Hashem is what He tells us to do is best for us. Right? Whatever it is, if it's not eating milk and meat together, if it's giving tzedakah, if it's not talking lashon hara, but of course, that's a gossiper. It's not a good thing to do, right? But the ultimate reason why we're not doing it is Hashem told us to do it. Why don't we kill? We don't kill because Hashem told us not to kill, right? Of course, it's a bad thing to do, but we don't kill because Hashem told us. For example, right, the halacha is that if someone comes to kill you, you're actually allowed to kill them. You're allowed to kill them. And there are times where you are allowed to kill. It's a terrible thing, but you are allowed to kill. We believe in capital punishment, right? And now we don't have a basin that could do that, but we believe in capital because Hashem told us we could kill, right? In that situation. The reasons why we do the mitzvahs, even the ones that Hashem revealed the reason for us, is because Hashem commanded us to do the mitzvahs, and not because of the reason behind the mitzvahs. Right, so says Moshe Feinstein, what we're supposed to grow and learn and connect when we're doing the chukim, right, that Hashem now revealed the reason to us is exactly that's the point. That we're doing it even though we don't understand the reason. We're doing it because we believe that Hashem, right, we don't know the reason, right, not because we don't understand, we don't know the reason. Right? Ultimately, we're doing it because we believe that Hashem, whatever Hashem will tell us to do, that's best for us. Even though we don't understand. And then when we get to mitzvahs, which each one of us has, and don't get me wrong, I have certain things that I really, and we are affected by the society that we live in, 100%, even someone that grows up religious their whole life, they're still affected by the society that we live in. And sometimes we question, really, is this really like, to X, Y, whatever it may be, really, is this really necessary? Is it really that bad to, to turn on the light on Shabbos? Is it really that bad to, whatever, if it has to do with gender, if it has to do with other mitzvot of kosher or whatever it may be, right? There's a million things out there that we might say, well, that's just not the proper etiquette of our 2025, right? The Torah tells us to do that. Hashem knows better than us, right? So when we know the reason, sometimes we say, well, that reason doesn't really apply to me. That reason doesn't really feel like it's something that makes sense nowadays, right? Ultimately, we're doing the mitzvahs because Hashem commanded us to do the mitzvahs. And that's what the mitzvah of the chok teaches us. The mitzvah, the tamei mitzvahs are there to help us grow through the mitzvahs, to learn from the mitzvahs, like we just said with tzedakah, right? The reason behind that helps us to build our emunah, build our faith in Hashem. But ultimately, we do it because Hashem commanded us to do it, right? So says Moshe Feinstein, that's the lesson that we're supposed to learn when we do a mitzvah of a chok. That's really the depth. That's really the ultimate relationship we're supposed to have with Hashem. The ultimate relationship that we have with our Judaism, which is with Hashem, is by building that emunah, building that faith that Hashem knows what's best for us, even though we might think it's not, right? And even in 2025, Hashem knows what's best for us, right? And there's no clause in the Torah. I've said this 100 times, and I'll say it another 100 times, right? There's no clause in the Torah that says that in 2025, when society changes, right, these mitzvahs don't apply. Right? It doesn't say it anywhere in the Torah, nowhere. And Hashem, and if you believe that the Torah is divine, and you believe in Hashem, right? If you don't believe, that's a whole another discussion. But if you believe that Hashem is divine and He knows everything that's going to happen. Now, we had a whole talk about this Shavuos night. It was a great talk. We had Shavuos night. We went at length into this. I'm not going to go into it now, right? But Hashem knows everything that's going to happen, not because He's telling us what's going to happen, but He knows what we're going to do, right? Because He sort of could go into the future. There's no concept of time by God, so He knows what's going to happen. He knows how society was going to be in 2020, and He still wrote the mitzvahs as they are. The laws of kosher and the laws of tzedakah and the laws of sexuality and the laws of Shabbos and the laws of putting a fence on your roof and the laws of lashon hara and everything in between, right? Hashem still wrote all that, and nowhere is there a clause in 2025 when society changes and whatever it is that these rules don't apply, right? So it's important. This is so important, especially nowadays, where a lot of us, it might not, Baruch Hashem, for a lot of us, it won't make us change what we're doing, right, per se, but it's something that we question, something that goes into our head, right, especially we keep on getting brainwashed, right, sort of by society, which keeps on pushing agendas, right, and I don't mean to go off topic too much, but it keeps on pushing agendas over the last 20, 30 years, right, through TV shows and through articles and through humor and through all these different things, right? What was considered immoral 20 years ago, right, is praised nowadays, right? Because these agendas keep on being pushed, and we get affected by it too. So how much more do we have to reinforce this in ourselves and say, this is our challenge? Maybe part of our challenge nowadays is by remembering that Hashem knows what's best for us, even nowadays, and even though it might go against the culture of society, right? About and how the society looks at certain things, but we will stand by the Torah, because at the end of the day, we know that Hashem, right, knows what's going on nowadays, and that's the mitzvah of Chok. That's this week's parsha, beginning of this week's parsha. And that's the lesson that we're supposed to learn from this week's parsha. Any questions? Okay, so let's move on. We're going to skip through the Parsha Paraduma. Right? I just wanted to touch for a minute. Rabbi Roberts spoke about 2 nights ago at Parshas in Torah. Right? It's a verse in Partners in Torah. Sorry. Right? It says verse 14. Right? On page 840 and 841 in the English. It says Zos Torah Adam. All right, those Torah Adam kiyamas ba'oel. This is a Torah of the Adam, of man, kiyamas ba'oel, when he dies in a tent, and whoever comes into the tent, and this starts talking about the laws of the spiritual impurity of death, right? If someone is in contact with someone that dies, or is in the same tent as someone that dies, right, and all the technical laws. But the Talmud, right, makes a play on words, right? And the Talmud says, right, Zos Torah Adam Kiyamas Ba'oel. This is the Torah Adam. This is a Torah of a person. Kiyamas Ba'oel. It says Kimemis Atzmo. Right, a person has to kill himself to learn Torah. How do you learn Torah? If you memis Atzmo, right? When one sort of kills himself to learn Torah. That's what the Talmud does a play on words. Those Torah, Kiyamas Ba'ol, Memis Atzmo, one has to sort of kill himself to learn Torah. Now, it doesn't literally mean to say you have to kill yourself. I mean to say that you have to be willing to give up on some of our desires, right? To connect to Torah, to connect to spirituality, to connect to our relationship with Hashem. And it's not easy. It's almost sometimes as if killing yourself, and it could be something seemingly small, right? But for this individual, that's something that's a milestone. If If it's giving up cheeseburgers, right, for some people, there's someone that I was learning, that's something that was very hard for him, right? That was like, for him to give up cheeseburgers was like, whatever, like that was crazy, right? And for other people, it's maybe not driving on Shabbos. For other people, it's maybe wearing their yarmulke the whole day. For other people, it's maybe making blessings. For other people, it's maybe putting on their tefillin every day. For other people, it might be, davening in a minyan every day. For other people, it's maybe davening 3 times a day in a minyan, or davening 3 times a day. For other people, it's lighting finite candles. For other people, it's dressing modestly. For other people, it's being careful with the laws of Nagia, of not touching the opposite gender if it's not family, right? Whatever it is, we all have our challenges, right? It's not speaking Lashon Hara, right? We all have our challenges, right? But we have to realize that the way we grow, the way we build our relationship with Hashem is when we kill ourselves. We're willing to take on that that hardship that we feel like, I can't do this. Like climbing up a hill. That's how we grow. That's how we say it's one step at a time. It has to be. You can't take on everything because then you're going to collapse. But you have to one step at a time. But it has to be something that's still significant, that you feel like, really, if it's because of peer pressure from family or friends, right, or colleagues, if it's this feeling that it's so hard, it's so different than the way you've been living your whole life, whatever it may be, right? But that's really the way we grow Torah. If it's taking on an extra learning seder, if for someone that's been learning the whole life, it's learning a little more. If it's giving a little more tzedakah than you usually give, it's whatever it may be. It could be a million different things, and it could be you have a list of things. Just pick one, right, to start off with, because then eventually, as you do, it becomes part of who you are, and then you'll start with the next one, right? And that's really the play on words that the Talmud does, right? But referring to really how someone grows. Those Torah Adam, right? This is the Torah of man, Kiyamus Ba'al, right? The Torah of man, the way to learn, the way to grow, and the way to connect with Hashem has been Memis Atzmacha, by sort of making yourself, killing yourself. That phrase is already in the secular world, right? Killing yourself for your business, or right? Sort of that's a phrase out there, and that's the same thing. We have to look into our lives and say, okay, what is it that I could take on a little more, right? That will allow me to change, and it'll be something significant. That will be hard, it'll be difficult, right? Some people had someone that they decided to start giving 10% of they'd never heard of such a thing, right? Okay, they heard tithing, they thought it was a Christian thing, but it's not. It's in the Torah, it's a mitzvah, right? For some reason, people think it's a Christian thing, right? It's in the mitzvah, it's a pasuk in the Torah, right? Asher Taser, it's the tithing, giving 10%, right? And they decided to start doing that. It was very hard, right? It was changing. They couldn't maybe go on a certain vacation that they wanted to go on, right? At the end of the day, he came back to me after. He says he realized that he was getting blessed more by giving more, right? That's not why we do it, right? But again, whatever it may be, right? That's really how we grow. We grow by doing that. Okay, let's move on. So. So we got over here, a second. Yeah, so we're if you turn the page to 842 in the Hebrew, famous story, very famous story where the Jewish people again complained they didn't have water. Right? It's first the Torah says that Thomas Miriam died. Verse 1, chapter 20, page 84. Miriam passes away. Right? The Thomas Miriam Vatikvar Sham, and she was buried there. Right? And below Lahaya Maim Laeda, there was no water for the congregation, for the Jewish people. Right? And of course, what happens when the Jewish people don't have something in the desert? They go and complain to Moshe and Aaron. Things still haven't changed. Right? They complain to the board, they complain to this, they complain to that, they complain on WhatsApp, they complain here, complain there. Right? Baruch Hashem, that's a little sarcastically, but we still haven't changed. We keep on complaining. Right? But so before we go into this whole story, and I want to talk about this, and we still have, Baruch Hashem, we have a few minutes to go into it. Right? But why is it that what's the connection of Miriam dying to not having water? Like, what does one have to do with the other? Miriam dies and they don't have any water. Okay, what does one have to do with the other? So the Talmud tells us, right, that there was three main things that happened that kept the Jewish people sustained in the desert. There was the be'er. There was the water that came from like a rock from a it's called be'er. It's really called a well, but it was sort of came from a rock, right? What's created, the water came out from it, created a sort of a well of water. There was the Anani Akava, there was the clouds of glory that shaded the Jewish people from the sun and flattened out the mountains, and God made sure they didn't get bitten by scorpions and made it comfortable, right? Sort of made the desert comfortable. And then there was the manna that came down from heaven, the manna that came down from heaven. Those were the three main things that sort of sustained the Jewish people. And it says that the Be'er Miriam, it's called Be'er Miriam, right? The well of Miriam. The water came in the merit of Miriam. Right? In the merit of Miriam, that's why they had water. And it says because Miriam waited for Moshe by the water, other reasons why also, but the water came in the merit of Miriam. The Anani Akava, the clouds of glory, came in the merit of Aaron. And the man came in the merit of Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? That's what it says, those three things. So now, but Thomas Miriam dies, so she passed away, so her merit is not here anymore, so the water stopped flowing, right? The water stopped flowing, so this water stopped flowing, so the Jewish people come and complain to Moshe and say, hey, we got no water, right? We're going to die in the desert, right? And it continues, and the nation got upset, right? Why do you bring us out into the desert to die, right? And you're going to take us out from there, right? And then it says Moshe and Aaron went to the Moed, right? And the cloud of glory of Hashem came onto the tent, right? So that's number one. Number one, we have to understand that that's why there was no water, right? Another thing to remember that this is sort of, we're now sort of at the end of the 40 years, right? Somewhere in the end, we're not exactly at the end of the 40 years, we're somewhere near the end of the 40 years of the desert. So this is already, they've been sustained for a long time, right? And then they complain again. I don't want to get into why they complain again and all that stuff. That's not the point of today of what I want to get into. But what we're going to talk about is the transgression, right? That the next part of the story that really changed the course of Moshe and Aaron. So what does Hashem tell Moshe? God speaks to Moshe, says, take your mata, take your staff, right, and with the Ada, with Aaron, your brother, the dibarta alasala, and you should speak to the rock, right, le'inayim, in front of all the Jewish people, and then nasati meim v'hotzila mayim and I'll let water come out from the rock again, and everybody will drink from it. So clearly it says that Hashem told Moshe to take the mata, take the staff, but he told him to talk to the rock. So what does the pasuk then says? Verse 9 says, "Vikach Moshe samata." Moshe took the staff. We're on page now 844 on the top. I had 845 in the English on the top, and he took the mata lefnei Hashem kashetzivo, in front of Hashem like him. And he gathered everybody al pnei hasela v'yarm lehem, and he says, he's telling Shimona, listen, you rebels, right? He said, listen, you rebels. Right, from this cellar water will forth come again. Right, and then it says, and Moshe lifted his hand, and he hit the rock with his pamayim twice, and then water came out, and everybody drunk from it. Right. So what to do? Hashem told Moshe to speak to the rock. Right, and Moshe went ahead. It says that he said the water will come out from this. Right, but nothing happened. So then he hit the rock, and it says he hit the rock twice, and then water came out. Right, so what's next? Then it says, "Vayamar Hashem Moshe Aaron." Hashem said to Moshe, "Yan lo imantam bi, since you did not believe in me, right? Laktisheni le'enei b'nei Yisrael, to make me holy, right? Laktisheni, to make me holy in front of the Jewish people. Lachen, therefore, lo savia kahal hazeh el haaretz asher nasati. Therefore, you will not bring this nation to Eretz Yisrael." And this is where Moshe and Aaron lost the privilege of going to Eretz Yisrael because they weren't involved in the sin of the Meraglim, the spies. All right, so this is a story where they lost the privilege of going. And then it says, "Hey, Me Meriva," this is the water, the strife, the rebellious water that the Jewish people rebelled against Hashem, and they did not become holy. All right, so this is a story of Me Meriva. I want to talk about this for a few minutes. If we have time after this, we'll continue with the rest of the parsha. Right? If not, we'll do it another year. Right? Right? But the question is, right? Number one, right? What's going on over here? We're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was up in Shemaim. It's not like it's what he forgot. He had all time. Like what happened? Hashem told him clearly to speak to the rock. So why did he go ahead and he hit the rock? Right? Why did he go ahead and hit the rock? Right? We have to understand this. We're not talking about just any person. Of course, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't mean to rebel against Hashem. And then it's pretty harsh the way Hashem says Moshe Rabbeinu does one transgression. Right? We know of one transgression. Okay, that the Torah speaks about that he told. And what is Hashem? Hashem comes down on him and Aaron so harsh, right? What does it say? It said, "Lo imantam bi, you did not believe in me." Oh, we're talking about Moshe and Aaron. They don't believe in Hashem, right? So they failed one time. I don't know, whatever. We'll have to explain. But Hashem said, "Lo imantam bi, did not believe in me." And then to make me holy in front of the Jewish people. What does it have anything to do with make me holy in front of the Jewish people? It's just they didn't do the right thing. Okay, so I'm punishing them. And the question number 3 is why usually, and especially in the Torah, the punishment has to fit the crime. Right? It's clear. There's very strict rules of what punishments are in the Torah. Right? If you do this, you get this kind of punishment. You get to do this, you get that kind of punishment. It seems a little excessive from Hashem over here because they did this one thing, that's it. You can't go into Eretz Yisrael. We understand the sin of the spies. They talk lashon hara against Eretz Yisrael, right? It was a lack of faith in Hashem of being able to take them in. Okay, so that makes sense. But because of this one transgression, the water came out in them. And the Jewish people were happy that they got water, right? So where's the punishment? How does the punishment fit the crime? Right, that they because of this they can't go on Eretz Yisrael. So these are just a few questions that the commentaries ask. There's more questions. We don't have time to go into all of them. Right? It's really, these are the kind of parshas that really we have to learn with the commentaries. Right? That we have to remind ourselves. This is especially these parshas, all parshas, but we have to remind ourselves we can't look at it as face value because then we could, God forbid, become, it could be a heresy by thinking that Moshe Rabbeinu really. We're talking about great people over here, right? And a lot of people, unfortunately, like to use these stories and make up their own things and to try to humanize Moshe and Aaron and whatever it is, right? We're talking about, of course, they're humans, but we're talking about Moshe who was up in heaven for 40 days and 40 nights. Aaron, who was the first Kohen Gadol, right, goes into Holy of Holies, right? So what's going on over here? So the commentaries explain. Right, there's a few. I'm going to mix together a few different commentaries to put together the way I want to put it together. Right, from the Kli Yakar to the Archaim to others. Right, who sort of Rashi, Ramban. Right, sort of putting together a few different commentaries. Each one has sort of their direction and their way, but sort of putting them together to sort of get a picture to get a better understanding of what's going on over here. And so I'm not going to say any specific comment. I'll mention the Archaim the end when we sort of do a little wrap up, right? But the commentaries explain that what happened over here is that the first time that the Jewish people needed water, when they complained about water, Hashem told Moshe to hit the rock. That was all the way back right after Kriyas Yamsuf, all the way back then, right? Hashem told Moshe to hit the rock, and over then Moshe had to hit the rock, and Moshe hit the rock, and water came out. Now Hashem, of course, told clearly to have Moshe to speak to the rock. And if you look at the wording of the Torah, it says that Moshe gathered everybody, and he said, right, Vayomer Lahem, he told us, Shimu na amorim, listen, right? From this cell, water should come out, right? So the commentators explain that Moshe did speak to the rock originally. He said water should come out from this rock. He gathered them and he said water should come out from the rock. But the Midrash tells us, and I think the Talmud speaks about this also, that the Satan, the evil inclination, went ahead and he mixed the rocks. He made the rock amongst other rocks. And Moshe didn't talk directly to that rock. He talked to the wrong rock, right? Because he switched it around. And Moshe didn't realize that, right? And so then when no water came out from the rock, when Moshe spoke to it, Moshe thought maybe he misheard Hashem. Maybe he misheard him. Maybe the last time he did it, he hit the rock, right? And water came out from the rock, right? So maybe he misunderstood what Hashem said. Maybe he has to speak, but then also, like, of course, like you did it last time. First speak, right? And then, like we did it last time, right? But maybe Hashem didn't feel that he had to speak that out. So Moshe was making these different calculations, and therefore he went ahead and he hit the rock, right? Because he thought that, so it says, and then the Midrash says that a trickle of water came out when he hit the rock, and it was supposed to be a sign from Moshe, like, this is not the right thing, re-speak to the rock. But Moshe thought that maybe it needs to have a sort of a double power, and that's why it says Palmaim, that's why he hit the rock twice, and then Hashem let water come out, because he didn't want a desecration of Hashem to come out, right, by no water coming out, and therefore the water came out after he hit it the second time. So really, right, it was Moshe did speak to the rock first, right, but the Satan got involved and the evil inclination got involved, right. Now that was on Moshe's level, that was his test, right, of sort of realizing that and not sort of making his own calculations. Now we, 2020 hindsight, we're looking at it, we say, well, look at that, really, we wouldn't have made that mistake, right? Hello, Moshe, right? But when you're in that situation and you're on that level, right, the Torah always magnifies these things for us to be able to pick and to learn from, right? But on that level, it was don't forget, the whole nation was on top of him, and there were, and so he thought, okay, maybe I misheard, maybe I misunderstood, maybe it had to be a combination of the two, right? Of course I heard right, but a combination of the two, and therefore he went ahead and he hit the rock, right? And then, but it says Pamaim, he hit it twice because Hashem was trying to give him a warning, but he went ahead and he hit it again. So that explains, and that explains why Moshe Rabbeinu went ahead and hit the rock instead of talking to the rock, which he did talk to the rock, but he talked to the wrong rock, right? But he didn't go ahead and look and make sure that he talked to the right rock, right? So that sort of gives a little explanation behind that. But now we have to understand is why did Hashem come down so hard on Moshe, right? Okay, so he knows that the evil inclination, he knows that the Shatan, the evil inclination switched the rocks, right? He knows that this was a test for Moshe. He knows the whole scenario that the whole Jewish people are on top of him. They're about to rebel, right? And sort of, kill him, sort of say, right? So this was a very intense time. So he knows that he spoke to, so why did Hashem come down so hard on Moshe and Aaron, and then the punishment if they can't go into Eretz Yisrael, and you didn't believe in me, right? What's going on? What's going on? So the Rechaim HaKadosh says, the Rechaim explains something very powerful. He says that, and this is a very deep Kabbalistic idea, but a very practical thing that we have to know, and something that we could grow from also. Says the Rechaim that Moshe Rabbeinu was holding on such level of spirituality that anything that he would do would have an infusion of spirituality into it that it would last forever. Like we explained that Hashem, we just touched upon it very quickly, Hashem is infinity. There's no concept of time, because in spirituality there's no concept of time, right? We talked about this in previous classes, that Moshe Rabbeinu, when it says that his eyes did not get weak, right? It's not because he had great 20/20 vision, and the Torah is saying, oh, look how well he took care of his health. It's because Moshe Rabbeinu was on such a spiritual level that his body did not get old, right? Because the age comes with time. Moshe Rabbeinu infused spirituality into his body, right? So much that it was a sort of all spiritual, and there's no concept of time in spirituality. That's why there's stories of great rabbis whose bodies that had, for some reason, they had to be dug up or whatever it is. Unfortunately, governments wanted to make roads, and their bodies were fully intact years later, right? Because it did not decay, because decay has to do with time, and their body was infused in spirituality. And so Moshe Rabbeinu was holding on such a spiritual level that not only was his body infused in spirituality, but anything that he would do, anything that he would make would be infused with that level of spirituality, and it won't be able to be destroyed because it has that level of spirituality. Therefore, says the Archaim Acharos something unbelievable. He says that when the Jewish people sinned the sin of the golden calf, right, they and the sin of the spies, right, they lost that ability of having the utopia of like Adam Rishon Kodem Achet, Adam before the sin. A utopia of being able to be in Israel forever, and the utopia of all spirituality, they lost that. Right? They lowered themselves. They were holding on that before those sins, but they lost those. They lost it because of these transgressions, right? And so, therefore, automatically, Moshe and Aaron will not be able to go into Eretz Yisrael, even though they didn't do anything. But they will not be able to go to Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because if Moshe Rabbeinu went into Eretz Yisrael, they would have won the war right away. It wouldn't have been 7 years, right? Moshe Rabbeinu, with his spiritual energy, right, would have conquered Eretz Yisrael completely. Would have built the base of Mikdash right away. Right? And then since Moshe Rabbeinu built the base of Mikdash, right, it would not be able to be destroyed. And then Hashem would not be able to take his wrath out on the stones, sticks and stones, and instead would have to take his wrath out on the Jewish people. Right? And therefore, right, Moshe Rabbeinu would not be able to go into Eretz Yisrael, to be able to build the base of Mikdash and to create this utopia, because the Jewish people were not holding that. Because Hashem knew that they were going to sin, and he knew that they're going to go into exile. So what Hashem was doing now at the end of the 40 years was, now that there was a lack of water, Hashem took this opportunity and said, Moshe, I'm giving you an opportunity to lift the Jewish people back up to a higher level. Rashi says, "Lahakdisheni," to make me holy, right? Rashi says, "She'ilu debarta lasela." Rashi says that if you would have spoken to the rock, you would have elevated the Jewish people. But Omrim, they would have said like this: "Ma sela zeh she'ena medaber ve'eno shemeh." What, this rock that doesn't talk and doesn't listen, not able to hear, and it doesn't need anything to live. B'kayim dvar somakim will fulfill the will of Hashem. Havachomer, how much more so anu, us, right? That we are flesh and blood, and we could hear and we could talk, and we need Hashem all the time. How much more so we listen to Hashem when Hashem speaks to us, right? So, but now that you hit the rock, right, they lost. That's what it means. Lo imantam bi laktisheni. Not that you didn't believe in me, but lo imantam bi laktisheni. You didn't use this opportunity to make the Jewish people believe in me on a greater level. Lahaktisheni, to make me holier, make me more spiritual in their eyes, which would have elevated them, Le'eni b'nei Yisrael, in front of the Jewish people, and that would have elevated them, right? And then they would have said this Kavachomer, they would have said, how much more so do we have to listen to Hashem? And then they would have been able to, that would have taken them back up to the level of Adam Rishon Kodem Achet. It would have taken them back to the level of Adam before the sin of the apple, of the tree, right? And then they would have been on this utopia level. And then they would have gone into Eretz Yisrael with you, and then it would have been the end of days, right? It sort of would have been the end of days. Since you didn't do that, so now you're back to the default. You can't go into Eretz Yisrael. So you're right. Really, the punishment doesn't fit the crime. Right? This is not a punishment. This is not the punishment for the transgression of Moshe. It was, of course, it was a big transgression for Moshe, but there was so many other factors and so many things, and it was a difficult time. And of course, it's not. But it says Archaim, it's a cause and effect. It goes back to the initial thing of that Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't go in because they sinned the golden calf, and they sinned of the sin of the Meraglim, of the spies. And the Jewish people were not holding on a level that Moshe could go in Eretz Yisrael with them, right? And that's what the Archaim says, right? And explains, says the Archaim, right? Explains that that's also later on in Devarim, right? When it recaps the story, I think it's, I have to look, I don't remember what Parshah it is again, but when it recaps the story of the sin of the golden, of the sin of this story over here, right? Moshe Rabbeinu says, and Hashem didn't allow me to go to Eretz Yisrael manchem, because of you, right? It clearly says because of you. So all the Mepharshim ask because of you, Moshe Rabbeinu, what are you blaming the Jewish people for? Right? Like every good, politician blames everybody else, right? Well, Moshe Rabbeinu is not like that. You sinned, the Meriva. You hit the rock instead of talking the rock. That's why you can't go in. So why is Moshe Rabbeinu saying? Why is it Moshe Rabbeinu saying? It's because of you. It says Archaim. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu means. We say that I could not go into Eretz Yisrael not because of the story. And I wasn't able to go to Eretz Yisrael because you guys sinned the golden calf and you guys sinned the sin of the spies. And therefore, Klal Yisrael is not holding on a high enough level for me to be able to go to Eretz Yisrael. I messed up by now not giving you the opportunity to be able to elevate yourself by going back into Eretz Yisrael. Right? Yes, that's my fault. But originally I couldn't go because of you guys. And that's what it means later on when it says, because of you I couldn't go into Eretz Yisrael. And I think besides giving a clarity to the story and giving a new insight into this episode of the Parsha, I think it also gives us a tremendous insight into what it means to be connected to spirituality. Right? And what it means to be constantly looking into our lives and saying, how can we make a Kal V'chomer into our own lives and grow spiritually? Right? Moshe Hashem made this opportunity. Moshe didn't capitalize on it on his level, right? But we could constantly look in our lives and say, if this is happening, how can we grow and how can we have a relationship with Hashem? Look at all these rockets that were sent there to Israel, right? And yes, of course, the ones that did land and did make devastation and unfortunately killed and injured people, right, is a terrible tragedy. And we daven and we think about all of them, but at the end of the day, it could have been a million times worse, right? But Hashem protected us, right? And any other in our daily lives, so you just missed the crash or whatever it is, we have to stop and we have to reflect in our daily lives and say, wow, Hashem is with us all the time. But also, it's something to reflect on a level that's beyond our comprehension. But we, as a famous thing line, this famous thing is, if you're playing darts or whatever it is you're doing, right? Playing darts, right? So I'm not very good at it. Okay, so I'm going to aim for the side. If you aim for the side, what happens? You get it off the board, right? You have to still aim for the middle, right? Even though you know you're probably not going to get it in the middle, but if you aim for the middle, at least you'll get it on the board. Right? So we have to know what our North Star is. We have to know what the middle is. We have to know that there is this concept of a level of spirituality that one could transform his whole body into a spiritual beacon. And that will take us back to what we started off with, Adam Kiyomas Ba'owel, right? And realizing that if we have to take on those hard things and the chok, and to realize that even those things that we don't understand on a daily basis, or our society has corrupted our way of thinking, right? Or society has corrupted, right, our feelings or our morals or whatever it is. We have to stand strong with we look at that as a chok, right, and say, even though Hashem gave us a reason for it, but we might not understand it, that's also the chok. But we have to listen and realize that Hashem knows what he's talking about. Right? Hashem knows that in 2025 we would have different culture and different things and different ways of looking at things, and still this is a mitzvah in the Torah, and this is still what you're not supposed to be doing. And when we connect to that and we memes atzma, we take on the hard things and say, this is, even though it's a little out of my comfort zone, wearing a yarmulke more, or eating a little more kosher, making a blessing of our food, or being on shomer negia, whatever it is, right? That one is struggling, giving your 10%, whatever it might be, right? Then we're connecting, we're getting closer to that ultimate spiritual connection of our neshama and our body to create our body into a beacon of spirituality, which our soul, right, is in charge of. Thank you all for joining us today. Everybody have a wonderful day.